I woke up to medical equipment beeping monitors. Plastic tubing adhered to my arm and profound silence. Not a single familiar face was near my bedside. No mother's grief, no. Father's comforting hand, no. Sibling pacing outside the glass. Just utter emptiness in that Chicago hospital. When I finally activated my mobile phone, there it was. One single notification, a message from my father, Arthur. Send $52,000 for your sister Naomi's wedding. Expenses, no inquiry about my health. No expression of worrying. Just a demand for money, always money. That was the precise moment something within me broke. Not in an explosion of anger, but in a moment of uncheckable clarity. I understood I was not considered family by them. I was merely a wallet, a vital resource, a figure they felt entitled to deplete. So I instantly blocked his number and severed all ties with them. That is where the narrative should have ended, but it was just the beginning. When I was young, I deeply believed in allegiance. I believed in the bond of blood. I worked diligently, studied relentlessly, and consistently made sacrifices. Every single paycheck I earned, half of it was channeled to their residence. Groceries, utility accounts, school, tuition, even the down payment on the residence they frequently boasted about to acquaintances. I was their source of pride when it benefited them. I was their personal bank when it did not. They would constantly tell me, "You are the resilient one. Your sister Naomi requires more assistance. Your brother Benson has aspirations. You can manage this responsibility," and I accepted their words until I found myself prone in a hospital bed completely alone. It wasn't just that one cold message. It was the continuous pattern of behavior. The last 3 annual birthdays were ignored. The last holiday feast was called off with me but hosted without my presence. Every call focused on financial loans. Every text revolved around money. And when I fell gravely ill, when pneumonia caused my lungs to fail, and the intensive care unit became my solitary prison, they didn't even care whether I survived the illness. That final message was irrefutable evidence I could no longer deny. I was not their son. I was not their brother. I was their personal automated teller machine. So I made a crucial decision, not fueled by raw emotion but by ruthless precision. I ceased responding. I stopped providing funds, and I stopped attempting to explain myself. Initially they panicked. Phone calls, aggressive texts, pathetic attempts at guilt tripping. Then the accusations began: ungrateful, selfish. What about our family obligations? But I remained perfectly silent. I allowed them to scream into the void of my absence, and while they were desperately scrambling, I meticulously executed my plan. I secured every existing account, canceled all automatic transfers they had set up using my cards, and froze the foolish joint accounts I had agreed 2 years before. That residence they inhabited, the one I had paid for but allowed them to register under their names, I had meticulously preserved copies of every single receipt, every transfer record, every contract. My legal counsel transformed that paperwork into a deadly weapon. Within several months, their cherished dream home was legally no longer theirs. They had demanded $52,000. I gave them absolutely nothing, and I subtly ensured that news circulated quietly through our community that the family which publicly displayed such immense wealth was now entirely buried in significant debt. By the time the invitations were distributed, creditors were closing in on them. But the final action, that was deeply personal. 6 months later, I walked into my sister Naomi's wedding reception completely uninvited. They hadn't for a moment anticipated my presence. They thought I had simply disappeared permanently. The hall was extravagant. Borrowed capital was thinly disguised with inexpensive luxury. Musicians performed, guests gossiped, and my parents smiled, widely determined to pretend everything was flawless until my arrival. Conversations instantly ceased, heads turned, and my father, Arthur, froze completely. I walked directly to the elevated stage. My voice was low and perfectly steady. I wasn't invited, but I felt compelled to arrive to offer my blessing, I announced. Gasps and whispers filled the hall. My mother, Naomi, tried desperately to quiet me, but I calmly raised a hand to stop her. "Do not worry, I will not linger for long," I continued. "I simply need to share the truth of the situation." Then I did the one thing they never anticipated. I publicly disclosed how they had completely drained me financially. How I lay near death in the ICU while they only begged for money. How the house they proudly claimed ownership of was never truly theirs. How the overwhelming debts now accumulating were entirely of their own making. Every single sentence landed like a heavy blow. Every guest listened in astonished silence. I concluded with this final statement. My father once messaged me while I was critically ill in the hospital. He did not ask if I would survive. He asked only for $52,000. Then I placed the printed text message on the central table for everyone to clearly examine. My father's complexion turned to ash. My mother completely collapsed. My sister Naomi burst into tears. Not tears of shame, but tears of genuine fear, because the elaborate illusion they had constructed was rapidly disintegrating right in front of every single person. And then I simply walked out. By the next morning, the wedding was a complete public scandal. Creditors began demanding immediate repayment. The house was swiftly taken. Their so-called friends stopped returning their phone calls. The family reputation they had tirelessly polished for many years was utterly ruined. And as for me, I felt no remorse. I experienced no sense of loss. I finally felt a full breath of air in my lungs. Again, freedom, because revenge is not always about destroying someone else. Sometimes it means holding up the mirror they have deliberately avoided. Their entire lives, they only wanted me to be their wallet. Now they were left with nothing at all. I gave them silence, and that silence was much louder than anything they had ever deserved.